If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes, and joining us today with his powerful message is the Sober Gangster, Jason Williams. Jason was 19 years old on October 12th, 1996. He was sitting in his jail cell. He had been arrested over 20 times. He was facing 10 plus years in prison for violating his parole after he was released just 5 months earlier. But he made a decision. He decided then and there that he was done with drugs and alcohol. He knew at that moment that he could never use drugs like normal people, drink like normal people. I'm there too. He was given the gift of desperation, of surrender, and it catapulted him to change. Jason has not had a drink or a drug since that day, October 12th, 1996. Jason recovers out loud and he is free. By sharing his story so openly, as he says, he found true freedom. This freedom takes work, willingness, and honesty, but he knows firsthand that there is a life waiting for you that is beyond anything that you could have ever dreamed of. And Jason, Sober Gangster, thanks so much for coming on. That's one heck of a bio. I appreciate you being here.
Hey, Gary, I'm so excited to be here. We got to connect a little bit before the show and in previous weeks, and I'm stoked for what you're doing. I got to say, that was the first time I've heard an intro or an introduction. I've got goosebumps, right? Yeah. That was cool. That was cool to hear that from this seat. And to just reflect on, where I was at that point in my life to, we got to talk a little bit about where I'm at today. And it just brings it all back.
Yeah.
Man, I was a scumbag, criminal, just awful human being. And now I get to live this life of light. I live a light of light. And the future I could have imagined was just so minuscule compared to the future that I have today. It's I couldn't have even put a grasp around the life I get to live today back when I was sitting in that jail cell.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. I see you filling up there and I love it.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do because, those last few lines, those came from you too. And I'm going to read it again. There's a life waiting for you that is beyond anything you could have ever dreamed. And, you hear the saying, don't forget where you came from. Right. And for people like you and I, that can mean a lot of things, right? And for me, when I think of, don't forget where you came from, it means, where I grew up, a childhood, whatever. But it really means for me is where I was 17 plus years ago. And let me say also, you're one of the guys, I've been speaking to a lot of people. There's not too many people that are over 17 years. I'm 17. They're always like, wow, long-term sobriety, but you've been sober since 1996. And I think I saw somewhere you never even had a legal drink, right? You were too young.
Correct. Yeah.
Sober before you were of drinking age. Is that right, bud?
Yeah. Yeah. So I got sober at 19. And touching on that, that's 26 years sober. I mean, complacency kicks in, right? You start to live this amazing life that you never imagined. Yeah. And some of that history kind of gets put off into the backside until it comes back up again. And you're and that's what happened when you're reading that. It's it instantly came back up to, man, the life I have compared to where I was at, the chaos I was causing and wreckage I was causing in everybody's life around me, not just myself. There's no reason I should be alive or not completely locked up. There's no reason I should be on this planet. The fact that I'm still sitting here and so blessed with the life I have, when you look back on that time of my addiction, and it was short. Like I got sober at 19, and in a 4-year span from the first time I had a drink, and I actually got a post about this the other day because I'm doing some posts on my page for September National Recovery Month, and I started to just kind of tell my story in clips. And when I had that first drink, I was raised in Boise, Idaho. My family relocated to Las Vegas. Kind of got a culture shock there. I'm raised in an amazing family with amazing support, middle class. My parents just celebrated their 50th anniversary like 2 weeks ago, so they're still together. So I didn't have like the chaos that some people come from. And when I moved to Las Vegas, I was just this nerdy, dorky kid from Idaho, got introduced to some kids in Las Vegas my freshman year of high school. And I remember we were sitting in a canal in Las Vegas, one of those like flash flood canals. And I had stolen some purple passion from the grocery store, which is like a 2-liter bottle. They make it look like soda. It was grape juice and Everclear. And we were going to party in this drainage ditch. And that was the first time I got drunk. I had sips of alcohol from like my parents, like stolen it from one of their drinks here and there, but not actually with the intent of drinking alcohol to get drunk. And that night I got completely trashed. I threw up. I fell down the side of the cliff. I got bloody. I got caught because I always get caught. Like that's part of my story. Like everybody would go home, but I would get caught. And like, it was not some beautiful experience other than to me, it was like that scared little boy was gone. I was bullied a lot in high school, or not in high school, in elementary school and junior high. I always wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be in the crowd. I wanted to experience what I saw other people experiencing, and I never felt that way. And that night, all of that went away. Like all of those insecurities went away. I felt strong. I felt funny. People liked me. I didn't care what shenanigans I got into. I didn't care that I got hurt. I didn't care if I got caught. Like I gave zero shits that I was going to get caught. And because we were doing this in the backyard of my house, and I had to stumble home drunk and puke and blood, got in trouble, got grounded, I'm sure. And all I remember was when we were all done and we were busted and parents were yelling at us, was talking to my friends going, how are we going to do this tomorrow? Yeah. Like, how are we doing this tomorrow? That became my mission from that day on. So I wanted to feel the way I felt in that moment every single day. And that was, at like 14 and a half, 15 years old when I had my first drink. And, my poor parents, looking back on it, they did not know what to do with me. And, I've since been able to, through the work, make amends to them. And I've got to talk to other parents that are going through the same sort of issues where their kids, addicted to drugs and alcohol. And they tried everything they could to save me. They went as far as they could go. But I instantly went from like their sweet, nice boy to that Jekyll and Hyde description you hear about all the time was completely real in life. Like there was no middle ground. There was no middle. I'm just a high schooler party. Like it was, I went after drugs and alcohol as my mission every single day from that point. And so it was on me pretty quick. And that's where I do believe, like, I think some people can, through using drugs and alcohol, become addicted. But I also think some people are born with the gene. And for me, I believe I was born just based off my reaction to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was instantly an addict and alcoholic in all my behaviors from that point.
That's wild from the get-go. And yeah, I can feel for your parents too, because you just move, right? You're fairly new to this area, it sounds like, and you're a freshman in high school. And there's so many, you hear it all the time, people like you and I, we'll go out wherever we are, we'll come home, puke, bloody, beat up, arrested, whatever it is, and we can't wait to do it again the next day. That's the difference, right? I believe that's many differences of people like you and I, because I can relate to all that too, and I relate to everything you said too about, being shy or, being fearful, wanting to fit in. I have a mess of like less than, I'm not good enough. Once I had a couple of drinks in me, I was brave and those fears were gone. You mentioned, you didn't care if you got caught. I think I was trying to get caught, one thing to get caught at home, and then you're starting to get caught in other things, which you can relate to as well. Obviously, reading your bio, you got in a lot of trouble in a short period of time too, like 14 to 19. That's a heck of a run. You got arrested
Well,
plus times?
when I look back on it, it's like I spent more time in jail or rehab than I probably spent in actual school. I was probably, my parents or the court system, I think I counted at one point, it was like 8 different rehab facilities. I think I escaped from 2 of them, three of them I escaped from after. And you're right, like there was part of me that wanted to get caught because it didn't last very long for that incomprehensible demoralization. I love that term because it described me so well. That feeling of, I can't believe I did this again, came on pretty quick within a year or so. I wasn't doing the same things all my peers were doing. Like I was taking it to such an extreme level. They would catch that. I would go over here to this group of peers until I could get away with it and then come back over to this group. And they really did do everything they could think of to try to save my life. And because it was getting dark fast, the crime was happening really quick. I shared this story again on my Instagram the other day. Me and my friends, like as a group, came together and made the decision that it would be a good idea to try meth. And it was a conversation. Like it wasn't like we're at a party and some drugs were out and it just accidentally happened. Like, oops, I fell into a pile of meth. We made the conscious decision to go out and try meth because it was around our sphere of people we were hanging out with. There was a lot of older criminal type that we were around, and there were people that were involved with gangs, and we weren't. We tried to act like we were hard and tough, but if any real hard person came across me, they would have just destroyed me. And I can't believe I get more than I probably deserved. But we sat and made the decision that it'd be a good idea to try meth, and we were going to go to a reputable dealer that we knew to make sure our meth was good. And like, again, looking back, I'm probably 15 and a half, 16 when this conversation happened, about 15 and a half. And we went to the guy's house and we all sat down together and we tried meth. And the exact same thing that happened with alcohol was 1,000 times stronger the second I put that chemical in my body. And I was instantly addicted to, like, I could care less about alcohol. And that's a big part of my story was I didn't even drink that much from that point on. I mean, I drank every time I did drink, I would pass out in my own vomit. And that's why I got to the point of, I didn't enjoy drinking because it didn't last long enough. I didn't get high enough. I was incapacitated too quickly. And so I quickly moved to drugs, and every drug I could find, I would want to put in my body, and I could do it for long periods of time. And so I kind of just drank here and there when there was nothing else to do or while I was using drugs, but I became, heavily dependent on drugs. I was doing them before school, after school. I showed up to a final once for PE. I guess there was a PE final in high school, and it was a written final. And I only remember this because it was first class of the day, and I had gotten high and drank some alcohol and did some drugs before class. And I was sitting in class, and I just got really hot and started sweating. And so I took my shirt off in the middle of class, and the teacher's like, "What are you doing?" And I put my head down, and then I puked Captain Crunch all over the classroom.
Oh,
and because I was so out of it. And I just told the teacher I must be sick and stumbled out of there while I could hear whispers of people in the classroom going, "He's so fucked up." And I went to the nurse's office, told her I was sick, got sent home. My parents picked me up and they knew I was high. But that's the level I went to every day. Like every morning was get high, during lunch, get high, leave school, skip school, after school. I just didn't care anymore. And it was getting worse and worse. I think my parents caught wind that we were going to carry guns and do some criminal shit. We'd already been arrested a few times, and they made the decision that it was Las Vegas that did this to me. And by relocating me back to Boise, Idaho, it was a way to save me. And so they shipped me back to Boise, Idaho to live with my uncle. And they sold everything. They changed their jobs and they moved back to Idaho about 3 months later. But when I got back to Idaho, and again, at 16 years old, this is traumatic. My crew, I got to go back to Idaho. Like, this is awful. My girlfriend, probably everybody's crying at the airport. There were drugs in Idaho. Go figure.
Whoa. You found it.
It did not, it got worse. It got worse when I got to Idaho. And they got involved with like trying to practice tough love on me. So anytime I would disappear, anytime I'd go away, they'd call the cops call me in as a runaway. And that contributed to me getting arrested a lot. But then all my own shenanigans, of being a thief and robbing stores and robbing people and houses and violence was getting me arrested frequently. And like I said, whenever we would be at a party, a kegger in the mountains where nobody's supposed to come, when the cops show up, like, I remember everybody getting their ID taken, and I handed my keys to a friend and said, I'm going to jail. And he's like, why are you going to jail? Like, I always go to jail. Everybody at that party went home except for me. I rode away in handcuffs and went back to jail. It's just because I didn't care if I had a warrant. I didn't care if I had a court date. I didn't care. All of that was just getting in the way of me getting low. It didn't matter if I had consequences or not. And honestly, whenever they threw a net over me, it just gave me an opportunity to like come down for a minute from whatever run I was on.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. It just shows where, and it's so fast for you. I'm amazed at how fast this thing has, got to you. Like it, you mentioned earlier, you think it was in your genes and you were kind of born with it. And I totally believe that too. I think I don't know. I'm somewhere in the middle. I come from a long line of heavy drinkers of alcoholism on my mom's side. I'm the first grandchild on my mom's side, and they were like looking at me since I was like 9. They're like, watch him. Like he's already got it. And you know what? I proved them right, but then I started getting in trouble. None of them got in trouble the way I started getting in trouble. But you touch upon, there's a part in the big book. It's about the jaywalker. And I had showed this because, cunning, baffling, and powerful, right? Like the baffling part, I would just baffle everyone at every turn, except for me. I was just the most thick-headed, like didn't even care. You mentioned it too. You don't care. Don't even care. And that even becomes like who I am. Like, I don't give a shit. I don't care about anything. And I kind of live that way. But there's a part, and you probably know about the jaywalker. And, the jaywalker, he crosses the street, he gets hit by a car and goes to the doctor, like, all right, don't jaywalk. All right, I won't do that again. The next day he's jaywalking and gets hit by a bus. The next time he gets hit by, a fire truck. And they're like, why do you keep jaywalking? He's like, I don't know. I don't know why, but I can't help it. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, who was my wife, I gave her I was reading this passage, the jaywalker, and I gave it to her. I was like, read the jaywalker. That's me. And she's like, yeah, that is you. And so you touch upon so many things, but holy cow. But I want to hear, so Jason, what do you think? Can you put your finger on like what happened to you on October 12th, 1996, when you decided you were overcome? I was reading about you. I was following you. And, I put in that gift of surrender. I think you had said desperation. I think that's fair for both of them. Are you able to put like what happened there? How do you make that decision?
Well, and even talked about it like in that jaywalker story, don't go out and jaywalk again. And of course, no, I'm not going to go jaywalk again. I'm good. And going out and jaywalking again.
Yeah.
So I turned 18 in juvenile hall in Idaho. I'd been locked up for however long. And when you turn 18 as a juvenile, they were like, it was a big deal. They were like, you're an 18-year-old, you're an adult, your record's sealed. You've been locked up with us for 3 months or however long it was. I remember the guards like giving me the speeches and this is your chance, kid. You get to start clean. You get to come out the get-go, change your life. You're an adult now. And when I walked out of that jail, like I was committed, like I was going to do right. I had known at this point through all the rehabs and I knew I was an addict and alcoholic. I had tried to stay sober. I'd gone to meetings through green cards and it just never stuck. And so when I got out, like everything in me that day was, you're right. This is my fresh start. I can get my GED. I can go to college, all the things now I want to be a normal person. I want to picket fence. I want a job. And I got out 2 weeks later. I was arrested in the state of Nevada with 7 felonies. And that was my ability to stay sober. That's what me left to my own devices. That's all I could muster. And I got out and I must have gone on a runner and I was awake for 2 weeks straight. And we robbed every drug dealer we could find and decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona with another guy and made it as far as halfway to Las Vegas in this little town called Pioche, Nevada. We were so strung out. Like to this day, like feel like if I would have done that one last line that I was getting ready to do, I probably would have been dead. And a cop pulled up behind us in a car at 3 a.m, instantly arrested us. I had 7 felonies as an adult, and I got to go to the Nevada State Penitentiary for about 9 months to a year. All I remember is I turned 19 in the Nevada State Penitentiary. So I turned 18 in juvie. I turned 19 in the Nevada State Penitentiary. About 2 weeks after my 19th birthday is when I was released. They let me go back to Idaho on parole. I was on like one of those withheld judgments. So as long as I did what I was supposed to, the 10 to 15 years over my head would go away. If you screw up, you get the book thrown at you. And I was on a 10 years parole. I came back to Idaho. And again, fresh start. I'd gotten my GED in prison. Like I like to talk about that. Like, yeah, you got your high school. Yeah, I got my GED in the Nevada State Penitentiary.
Yeah.
And I had a plan with my dad. I was going to go to work with him. He got me a new truck to come to work at his company. I was going to start college. I even enrolled in college. I started going to meetings. Everything was flowing, right? Like I got some chips at the meetings. I, collected a little bit of time with my prison time and coming out. I think I even might have come up on a year. And one day, out of the blue, a friend of mine called me, and it's still my best friend. If you need to know that security question on my passwords, like who's your best friend, that's still his name. We've known each other since we were like 3. And he called me up and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to a party tonight. Do you want to come?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds fun. I haven't been to a party for a while. I have my shit together. I got a new truck that's baller. I'm going to school. I've been sober for a minute. Let's go."
Yeah.
So I went over to his house. He handed me a Heineken. He's like, "Hey, you want a beer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can have a beer. It's been a long time. I should be able to drink like other 19-year-olds drink. My problem was drugs." And for me, that's a big part of my story is just because I kind of moved away from the alcohol once I was introduced to drugs, the alcohol was the one that kept getting me back into drugs all those times. And I just never recognized it. And so that night I had a beer. We went to this party. Within 3 hours of that first beer, I was back in handcuffs with a DUI and driving without privileges. My friend was bloody because he got his ass kicked at the party we were at. And he rode home in a cab. Once again, the story is very consistent. I go to jail. Everybody else goes home. I was facing, a parole violation with 10 to 15 years over my head because I went out and had a beer. Nothing happened. I wasn't in a bad mood. My life was going good. I think I probably had a cute little girlfriend at the time. Like things were going good. And I thought I could drink like a normal person. And it just came from out of left field. And so I found myself sitting in that jail cell in Ada County Jail in Idaho. And I had one of those burning bush experiences. Like there were voices that were so clear that were like, you cannot drink like a normal person. And that moment, like I knew to my core that I had surrendered. And like you said, that surrender was on me. Like I would do whatever it took, whatever was suggested, whatever somebody told me to do to break free from what I was going through. And they released me the next day. I went straight to my parole officer and I said, "Hey man, I messed up and I got arrested last night. I got a DUI. I had relapsed and I know I'm in trouble." And he just looked at me. He's like, "The only reason I'm not going to violate you is just because you came and told me and you're honest. You didn't try to hide it.
Yeah.
This is your only get out of jail free card. Figure it out." And so he didn't violate me. And I instantly went, to where I found my solution in 12-step programs. And, I dove into the work. I worked with other men in the program and I did what was suggested. And through the 12-step program, like that compulsion was completely removed from my life. That compulsion to drink and use has been removed. And And that's, we can dive into some of the after part now, but that's kind of where that desperation came from was, in that moment, I was given the gift of, you can't drink like a normal person. I lived through my first step. And that's what I always refer to. So that's the one step I've done perfectly
Mm,
was that step. And it was not of anything of my own. It was given me.
right. And powerless over alcohol. I love how you lived it. I love that. Given that gift of desperation or given the gift of surrender, I've had that myself, and I can't fully put a finger on it, but it took me a little while to zoom out and realize that the obsession to drink has been lifted from this body. And, I say this a lot. If you knew me 17 plus years ago, I would have been probably voted the last person that you would ever imagine the obsession to drink would be lifted from me. And it has. And it's through the 12-step program for me as well. I came in my first time I went into, I was in a rehab. It was 2002. And my sober day is 2006. So I really was in a battle for 4 years, in and out, and just, in and out. And I get a little few days of time and I think I'm all right. And I go back out and never put 90 days together, even in the rehab, never put 90 days together. And there was a time within those 4 years that it was clear, like, you know what, Gary, one day you're going to have to, you don't do this normally. Like you are going to have to stop drinking. And I'm like, never going back to those meetings or anything, but I
Yeah.
wanted to stop drinking, and
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to me on May 12th, 2006, but I was just sitting in my apartment. I was all alone. I was drunk as a skunk. And it wasn't one of my real low nights, but I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I called AA and I called Intergroup the next day and I spilled all my booze out, which I had never done before because, not sure, you might feel
Yeah.
better in a day or so, but I did. And I haven't had a drink or a drug ever since. And that's amazing, and given that gift, I love how you say how you lived it. Like I really can't even fully put a finger on it because I'm not sure what happened, but I also know is I didn't want to do it anymore. So I'm sure I said, God, I don't want to do this anymore. And he answered my prayer right there.
Yeah.
But look at you. I mean, your story is incredible, unbelievable. I mean, it's funny because we're sitting here talking, right? You and I, and I'm hearing your story. And as you're telling me, I'm like, please don't do what he's about to tell me he's going to do. We all know what he's going to do. But you're here and you're here to
Yeah.
talk about it. But not only you talk about it, you recover out loud. And
Absolutely.
we talked off camera, or actually, I think it was on camera about where we've come from, right? Like, talk about the gifts that are given to you today and how you live your life today. Because you mentioned you talk to parents of, sick and addicted children, right? Like that, what is more, I can't think of too many things more powerful and more important than speaking to parents and trying to help them. Tell us about what's going on with Sober Gangster today.
I want to back up real quick just because you said
Yeah.
something that was awesome. And when you were talking about your first step, basically your moment of desperation and how it wasn't the worst one. I share that a lot. Like I had so many bottoms. I had overdoses and like a moment where I should not be alive, right? And plenty of jail, like all these bottoms that to a normal person that doesn't have the disease of addiction on them would be like, why don't you stop doing what the hell you're doing?
Yeah.
It didn't matter. Like that last bottom wasn't the worst one. It was pretty mild in comparison to everything I'd been through up until that point. The only thing that mattered about that last bottom is it was the one that counted. It was the one that it doesn't matter what your bottom looks like. It doesn't matter if your bottom is living under a bridge, drinking out of a brown paper bag and you're homeless and you've lost everything. Or like from what I interpret from your bottom, it was an emptiness and just could not be fulfilled anymore. And it was an internal bottom that was the one that mattered to get you to where you're sober 17 years. And I think it's important for people to we do that sometimes, especially new in the rooms, like we hear the stories and you're comparing, well, I didn't go through that. I never got arrested. It doesn't fucking matter what your bottom is. It only matters. My bottom, for me, the one that mattered. And it's the one that got me sober. That's all that matters. And so I love that for your story. It's like, it wasn't the worst one, but it was the one that counted.
Oh, I love that too. And what you're talking about, what you're touching upon is what I think we're doing, both of us right now, is I think, like we said off camera, we're not trying to help one person today. Like we're also
Yeah.
hopefully raising these bottoms, right? There was one thing that I did learn in rehab, and it sticks with me to this day, is that however low you think your bottom is, there is always another bottom, right? But by us talking about this, or you talking about your story and sharing this, we can hopefully raise the bottom for someone. Like they don't have to. You're right. You can sit and comparing. I'm a king of that. I walk into a room and say, "Wow, you know what? I'm not as bad as that guy. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'll see you later." But again, within the past 17 years, I just say, you know what? I'm not the worst one in here or worst story, but I'm not the best, cleanest story either.
Yeah.
Not by a long shot, but it doesn't matter. And it's all perspective, man. Like you don't even have to be in trouble. You don't have to have some awful thing happen. You don't have to put yourself through something awful for you to realize that this is not working for me and my life is a lot better without it. And there's ways and there's tools and there's tons of tools where we can help people. People can get help they need. It doesn't have to be arrested 20 times plus like you. I'm arrested a bunch of times, not 20, but I'm arrested a bunch of times. And me too. Like it was there used to be a joke. I went up, I did a semester in junior college, upstate New York, and my friends came to visit me. Like, how was it? And they're like, "How was pretty typical weekend with Gary." We went up there, we got there Friday, we picked him up out of jail on Sunday, and hopefully we'll see him next time. Like that's what it was like. Like that was the joke. That was the running joke. But I don't live that way anymore, right? And I don't live that anymore. And now you're helping people, man. Like I say it too, like it's the little stuff, right, Jason? It's the little things like like the disease has been front and center coming my way as far as like incoming help, like family friend got a DWI, lost his family, lost his house, everything. He's got a DWI. Another friend's brother is in ER. He's 50 something years old, drinking himself to death. He drinks his whole diet is drinking Jack Daniels and smoking cigarettes, and his body shut down. My point is, I'm getting those phone calls, right? And I didn't used to get. I wasn't even the last person to think of. I wasn't even on the list, but now I might be first on the list. And that is such a gift, and it's something. It's those little things that make me really, really proud and really happy. And my wife and I were laying in bed. She's like, look at what you've been through, but look at what you're doing now. You're helping people, and it's a beautiful thing. And I know this is like, look at your attire, Sober Gangster shirt, Sober Gangster hat. I love it. And you're helping people. Tell us about that. How does that feel today?
Well, it's cool. Like I was sitting here thinking about how much it's changed over the years. Like you said, I've always lived. Once that compulsion was off of me and I started to live truly in recovery, I pretty quickly got back to living. Like I didn't get sober to hide. I didn't get sober to be scared of the world. Mm-hmm. And I learned pretty quickly through, the community I was in that we could go anywhere as long as we were spiritually fit and we had each other's backs. And so I started to go places like dancing at bars with friends that were all sober. And then that led to, like, I started to have relationships with people that were in recovery and with just normal people that drank. Or I got back into the dating world and, started dating women that drank or didn't drink. Like I started to experience what life had to offer once I became sober and was truly living a program of recovery. And, I found my mind used to tell me like, oh, if they drink, they're going to try to get you to drink, right? Because that was my experience. Like the last time I drank was somebody handed me a drink. Right. When I was confident in my recovery and my sobriety, like I didn't run around saying, no, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I can't drink because I'll turn into a criminal. And like I learned I didn't have to say that. Like I would be out in public with friends. We'd be at a bar. They'd ask if I want to drink. I'm like, no, I don't drink. Oh, that's cool. And then eventually maybe they'd ask me questions. I found I have received more admiration from people that are normies because they all have addiction touches everybody. Even if you're not personally addicted, they all have family members, friends, cousins, brothers, sisters who have struggled with addiction and mental illness. I put the two together because, we've had, my stepdaughter, my bonus daughter, her dad recently, about 3 years ago, committed suicide directly due to his, alcoholism and addiction. So there's a lot of suicide that comes along with, being an alcoholic and addict. And so a lot of families are affected with it. And so I found like people respected it. And I started being open about it with my employers. Again, I didn't play the addict card. I mean, I did when I first got sober because I wanted like special treatment. Like, oh, you're late to work, Jason. Well, don't you know I'm an addict? At least I made it to work. And once I learned it's not like a get out of jail free card, and just was honest with people, like I don't drink. I never had any sort like that stigma that I think that people believed was there. I never experienced that stigma because I was an addict or alcoholic. I experienced actually the opposite side of that, where there was respect for me being honest about it and open about it. And that just grew over the years of sobriety, where, I just got louder about the fact that I was sober. And, there's been numerous conversations pre social media world, because it changed a lot when social media happened. And it's weird to think I'm that old, right? Like, I feel like I remember tape decks and CDs. And
Yeah.
it's like, I remember being sober before social media was around, and I was excited I could send a text message from my little flip phone. But I remember like being in a bar with people that I'm friends with, and I have my sober community, but I have my normal life outside of sobriety community, and guys that would be pissed drunk looking over at me going, I don't understand how you do it. How are you here with everybody?
Yeah.
And then that would turn into an offline conversation. That would turn into, maybe I need to try to manage my drinking, or maybe I do have a problem. And these people would work through their own solution just by having the interaction with me in that environment. Seeing that you could, like, I have been able to party my ass off till 3 a.m. dancing at a rave sober. And when people see that you can do that, they like start to ask, they're like, how are you doing this and why? And how are you able to be around this all the time? And the conversations would begin. And then flash forward to the world of social media. And, I had a great experience, and I share this a lot, and I'm still friends with them. I don't remember. I should go look it up on my social media so I know the exact date, but I want to say it's about 10 years ago. I celebrated a milestone. So it was probably my 15th or 16th year. And I decided to share it on social media. Most of the time, I kept a lot of that to myself. I didn't post a lot about that stuff. And I shared this milestone on social media. I treated it like I treat, when I walk into a 12-step meeting. When I walk through the door of a 12-step meeting, I speak whatever my truth is. I share from my heart. I'm vulnerable. It might be solution that day. It might be crazy because I'm hurting. I've cried so many times in the 12-step program. Like, for me, when I walk through that door, I speak the truth. And I did the same thing on this post. Like, I just shared the truth of my recovery, got really vulnerable and open about what it felt like to be at 15 or 16 years and how I got there and the pain I was in that led me to there. And a guy reached out to me at like 4 a.m. He called me, and I answered the phone because I'm like, this is weird. He didn't even he lived in Hawaii, I think, at the time. Like, why is he calling me? I haven't talked to him for 5 years, and it's 4 a.m. I better answer. So I answered, and he was like in tears. I just read your post. I've been sitting with it all night. Like, I've got to do something different. I can't live the way I'm living. Like, it just hit him to his core. And his sober date is the day after mine, but 10 years later, but he's still sober to this day, the day after my sober date, from that post that led to a conversation that led to him taking direction. Whatever happened that night was his bottom, and he's been able to find freedom from his addiction ever since then. And I knew at that moment, like, I need to do more of this. I live out loud, but I live out loud still filtered, right? Like, I wasn't sharing it on, and it's a gray area for me that I still struggle with even today. I shared about it in a 12-step meeting the other day. I want to follow the traditions. I want to follow and so there's a gray area there of, promoting it. And so I just really tried to walk that line and decide what worked for me. And, as long as I'm just sharing the solution that works for me in my life, and I'm, being public about my life and my story, if people are attracted to it, great. If they're not, they're not. But I learned that the louder I could be and the more honest I can be and vulnerable I could be, there's a chance that I might help somebody. There's a chance that somebody might hear something that I may never know. They may never reach out to me personally, but it may be that one thing they heard that causes them to call the AA hotline, or go to the Phoenix that's in their local area, or go to all these resources we now have, because they heard something that they were like, okay, it's time. I need to make a change. So that's where that kind of mission started to really be more public about it or vulnerable with my sobriety.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
It's not lost on me that, I'm 17 years, so I'm 9 years behind you, right? It's not lost upon me that I'm just starting the real public out loud, in the past couple of months. Like
Yeah.
this is new, right? But you're talking about early on, like I was definitely huddled, and wasn't that I was more afraid, Jason, that I was gonna fall off the wagon. That's why I was afraid of not telling everyone at first,
Yeah.
especially like at work or even people close to me, like because I was in and out for so long, like, and everyone knew it, friends,
Yeah.
family, all my people at work. I almost lost my job numerous times, and the whole place knew I went to rehab and my actual sober date for a good year or so. I wasn't certainly letting everyone know. I just kind of, all I did actually was go to work and go to meetings. And in
Yeah.
New York City, they gave you a pamphlet, and and they give you a bunch of phone numbers. Everyone signed it in the meeting. That's how they did it back then,
Yeah.
which I miss. It was a beautiful thing. And all I did was look in that pamphlet and find what meeting or two I'm going to go to that
Yeah.
night. All I did, work and go to meetings. And it was a great year. It was a great first year. And, as you mentioned getting more confident, I started getting more confident in my sobriety. And but there was a guy on my floor. He was like a boss, and he was sober. And I never really had like a real conversation with him, but he had said something to me about like being in a place where like if you felt uncomfortable and people were, I worked on Wall Street and there's a trading desk and there was, a couple hundred people on the floor,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of going out, a lot of entertaining. And he had said that, and it just worked for him. He said like if he was in a bad spot, he would just say like, all right, yeah, order me a shot, but first call me like a divorce attorney and my regular attorney because I'm gonna get divorced. I'm gonna get arrested tonight. Like, ha ha ha. But it just killed it, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of took that for a little while and I
Yeah.
ran, and I did that for a while. But the truth is, I can count on one hand the amount of times that really someone kind of, quote unquote, cornered me, be like, "What's your problem? Like, why aren't you like that?" Just doesn't happen
No.
ever, right? Like, and I think in our minds, I think newcomers, they think like, "What is everyone going to think of me? Like, what are my
Yeah.
friends going to think? What are the people at work? How am I going to do this? I'm going to be looked at as weak," and everything is couldn't have been further from the truth.
Yeah.
Fast forward, then I kind of became, I wasn't never like a thumper, but I always wanted to be like, hey, listen, if you know anyone, you said it yourself, like, there's 6 degrees of separation. In our world, it's like 0.1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
It's not like ground zero, you or I. It's someone really close to us, really close to them. And I was at a conference right before I launched this podcast, and it was like an e-commerce conference. It wasn't had nothing to do with this podcast. And I was like, I'm going to go there. And anyone asks me what I'm doing, I'm saying I'm launching a sober podcast. Like I was all in on this, and I got so many people at this conference come up to me like, "Hey, my girlfriend is struggling. My husband is struggling. What do I do? Can you talk to them?" And just honestly, 2 days ago, I got a text from one of these women. My husband was sober when we got married. Now he's fallen off the wagon. I don't know what to do. Can you help? And again, this is where we are today. And
Yeah.
said when I was started this little rant here is it's not lost upon me that you were similar time when you kind of made that post,
Yeah.
15 or 16 years sober and
Yeah.
really came out loud. So hey, I'm gonna hold on
That's,
to that. So
I like that synchronicity. You're right.
yeah,
And,
right, man. Why not?
it's about the time I felt comfortable enough to continue to, and I got the evidence, right? Like you started to get some of the evidence. The more you're doing it, you went to that e-commerce conference and you went all in and just said, I'm starting a sober podcast. And you got evidence of like people,
Yeah,
yes, start a sober podcast. We need it. We need
yeah,
you.
it's true. Like I
Yeah.
remember, I don't even know if I paid much attention to like the people. Actually, I met one guy who was a recent guest, amazing guy. His name is Julian Bryant. He was one of the panelists, and he mentioned he was in jail and he was sober. And I hit him up a couple of weeks ago, and he came on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's those little. Actually, they're not little things though, right? Like I don't know if ego is the wrong word because if we're helping again one person, it's a good day, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
like I said,
And
like
it's,
offline, like it's very quickly become like it's bigger than me, and I can feel that, and I love what you said too, because I talked to another friend, one of us, about what I was doing, and touched upon what you said, like walking that fine line, promotion versus attraction. And that was his message to me. He's been sober for a while. He's been doing this. He's like, just stick to who you are, which is,
Yeah.
Don't veer off and try to go into this promotion, world, because, and I say this to myself all the time, it's not for everyone, right? But
Yeah.
it's for someone, and we might not even know. You might not even know, but some guy in Hawaii who you knew read your post 9-10 years ago, and it changed his life.
Yeah.
So what's more powerful than that, man? So keep doing it, right? That's what I'm saying to myself. Get a few DMs now, like strange. It's amazing that strangers are listening, watching this podcast, and they're getting some of it, and it's growing. And
Yep. Well, and that's, really where Sober Gangster was born from. Like this only came about like 2 years ago. And I knew, and it was through watching, like, my wife does a lot of online podcasts and coaching business and helps a lot of people and single moms in the business world. And I've watched her grow her company to help a lot of people. And, through what she was doing, it was inspiring to me to be like, okay, there's more I can be doing out there. There's more ways for me to get the message, to share my story, to share that there is a solution. Like I truly believe you don't have to die from addiction. Like there are solutions out there. I found mine in 12-step programs. I've also modified through other, communities that are out there. The Phoenix is out there, which is a community for, people that are into fitness, and it's about building community, but it's also a sober community. There's all these modalities out there for people to find what works for them. And, I really wanted to do more, and I just couldn't quite put my finger on what I wanted to call it, what I wanted to do. And I was helping her with something, and she was starting a division of her company called Gangster Wedge. And I was sitting there like helping her with the website and helping her find the domain. And I was like, thanks. I wonder if sobergangster.com's available. And it was sitting in Florida. And I'm like, I'm going to see if it's available. And it just came up for auction that day as like a 3-day auction to buy the domain name. And so I bid on it, and because I was like, that's perfect. That's it. That's what I've been looking for. It just was like, again, burning bush moment. It was like, that's the one. And I did the auction, and I ended up winning sobergangster.com. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And I've just kind of been playing with it. Invested into building a website for it and making some fun swag and trying to really figure out what I wanted to do with it. And for people have asked me, like, what does sober gangster mean? Like, I've done some gangster shit, right? And I have a part of my mind that still is dark. I have a part of my mind that criminal stuff still comes in there. But for me, like, my sobriety is light. So when I think of sober, like, that's my light. When I'm in that world and I'm living a spiritual practice and living a sober life, I'm in my light. My gangster side is my dark. I always have both, right? I'm always a sober gangster. When I'm sober, even though I'm sober, I still have the dark that's living with me. I have the yin and yang all the time. Yeah. And sometimes I tap into that dark. Sometimes that dark has kept me sober, right? Sometimes when it's hurt bad enough, and and I've said this before, like the compulsion to drink and use has been removed. There's been moments in my 26 years of sobriety where a bullet in my mouth sounded good. I didn't want to drink, but I wanted to end it, or I wanted to hurt other people, or I wanted to do these things. Sometimes that dark, whether it was eating a bunch of bad food, whether it was cussing somebody out, those moments kept me sober long enough to where I was willing to call my sponsor, take it through the work, and overcome through my spiritual practice, whatever I was going through. And so I still rely on that dark sometimes. And so that's what Sober Gangster meant to me. It's like that duality of who we are as humans, having both sides all the time and embracing both of them and living in one that, living in that light. So that way, when the dark comes in, you have the ability to work your way through it. And so I just kind of sat with it for a while, but I had this event and we talked about it before. I was given this opportunity a couple of weekends ago to sponsor a big rock concert in LA. I just learned about it. It was put on by Wes Geer. He was a guitarist from Korn. I reached out to him. I'm like, I love what you guys are doing. Is there anything I can do to support it? And he offered me the opportunity to sponsor it. And kind of like what you did with the conference, I just said, this is the moment. I'm going to go all in with Sober Gangster and see what happens. I found the money to do it. I had to go. Came from my out of left field, and found the money to pay for the sponsorship. I got to sponsor their lanyard, so my logo was on everybody's lanyard with my QR code. And of course, the alcoholic mind was chirping the whole time, like, they're not gonna like what you're doing. Who do you think you are? Like, this is ridiculous. And so I ordered a bunch of swag for it and made a big investment to have a bunch of hats sent and clothing so I could give them to some of the musicians playing at it. And what Rock to Recovery was doing, it's a nonprofit. They're raising funds for their for-profit side to be able to help continue. They take music into inpatient facilities and help people use the arts and music to, transition through some of the emotions and feelings you're having when you're new in recovery. They help people write songs, produce your song, and help, express how you're feeling early in recovery. And they do it in, I think he said 1,200 different groups, or they do it a lot. It's all over the country. And so I really loved what they were doing. And it was a big celebration for recovery, and all the people that were playing in it were tied to sobriety and recovery in some form. And it was promoted to all the inpatients around California, and they brought people in. And so I just went all in, and kind of like what you said. And I wore this outfit, except I had a little fanny pack for all my stuff that was Sober Gangster. So I'd be an extra gangster with my fanny pack. And, the response was amazing. And it's kind of like what happened with you at your e-commerce, where people were like, yes, we need this, or I need support. And every time I've been wearing my Sober Gangster gear for a couple of years, every time I walk through an airport, somebody stops me and says either they're in sobriety or, what is this? I have a family member, and I've had conversations with strangers in airports and Walmart, and where people want to talk about what I'm wearing and why. And so I got some affirmation from that of what I'm trying to do was the right thing. But going to this event really kickstarted the affirmation and the positive feedback and the excitement around what I'm trying to do from all walks of life, right? You've got celebrities mixed in with people with 30 days sober from an inpatient treatment facility. I had people counting pennies to try to figure out how to buy a hat from an inpatient. So I gave away a hat to them, and then I ended up giving away a hat to the whole facility. The glow on their face, they're like, what can we do? And I'm like, just, if you're going to use, put on your hat. You can do this. You can stay sober. Every one of you can stay sober. There's no reason. There is a way out. And just remember that you were here at this party celebrating life sober, and you can do it outside of these rooms. And, I got to meet some great people. And again, just that affirmation of it was a spiritual experience, feeling like the path I'm going down is going to help a lot of people if I continue and stay the course and step out of my own way. So that's what Sober Gangster was born from. I know we're getting close to my hour mark. So, it gave me the motivation to, instead of dabbling with it, to just put myself out there. I have a Sober Gangster Facebook page, but then I actually started a Sober Gangster community that's private, that anybody in recovery can join. It's free. We're going to talk recovery in it. We're going to share stories. We'll invite people in. I did my first live ever today in the group, where I just got to talk to people in the group and share different stories and experiences I've had in recovery. And I'm going to go live every weekend, and then hopping on this podcast and starting to just talk. And we've got a lot more podcasts scheduled. And so we're just going to go big with it and have fun.
Brother, that is so beautiful. And I love to hear all of it. You say so much. I gotta talk about it really quick. Is you came to that point. I think it's an important point, right? We're sober. People could look at you and say, oh, he's sober for 26 years. He's got it all figured out, right? But life happens, right? And there's times you said maybe you didn't want to have a drink or a drug, but you wanted to put a bullet in your mouth a few times. You get upset with yourself, right? And that's a huge thing. But you ended up at that rock to recovery concert, and you said you wanted to take this hat because you should celebrate life. That's what you're doing, and that's what I want to convey through this podcast, because it's oozing out of you, man. That's who you are right now. And I think this is how the podcast started, because I'd hear these incredible stories, right? These comeback stories. And I'm listening to your story and I'm listening to you. And, you're 19 years old in that jail cell, but today you're helping people and you're making decisions. Maybe there's some higher power helping you with some of these decisions and you're going all in. And the domains happens to be available and you win it, right? Like there's
Yep.
a few little moments of divinity there. And you also talked about, or again, it's kind of just coming out of you, how you live your life now. And this is kind of dawned on me recently. Like I always said, like, I just turned 49 July 2nd, 49 years old. And I have more goals and dreams than I ever had, ever in my life. And I've been saying that for like the last few years, and I mean that sincerely. But
Yeah.
again, it dawned on me that is because I'm sober and because I get to work on myself and because I have connection and I have community. And if there's something wrong, like you said, you cuss somebody out, you have a problem with someone, you act maybe how you're not supposed to act. I go and make the amends. I say, I apologize, or I call my sponsor, or talk to my group and say, hey man, I messed up. This is what I did. I was impatient with my son, man, and I can't shake it. Like, like you talk it out and you have that sense of community. But you're here and you're helping people. So where can we find you? And let me ask you one question also, as far as the sober gangster community you're talking about, is that like a coaching? Is there a sober coaching there, or is it just a free community?
No, really with the Sober Gangster group, it's just a free community on Facebook. You can find my Sober Gangster Facebook page really just by going to sobergangster.com. There's links to all of that. You can find the community through the Sober Gangster page. It's a free group. It's not coaching. We're not, it's just a community of people that are in recovery together. And, kind of like how I talk here, I share vulnerably in that. I show up in that in a way that maybe I wouldn't show up completely public because it is a private space for people to share and, get support that they need. Of course, I shared this just on a post that like I'm always available. People can DM me directly if they're struggling. I might only be able to work with you a little bit, but I can help direct you to find resources. But by all means, I'm always available for that direct connection with people that are struggling. Especially early in recovery, there's a lot of great solutions out there. 16 years old, like I've had bottoms in recovery.
Yeah.
And those bottoms in recovery are equally as hard to get through as getting sober. And so even if you're in long-term sobriety and struggling and, the idea of drinking isn't there, but all the other stuff is there are people that you can reach out to and work through that have gone through the same stuff. Because anybody that's stuck around for a period of time, life happens. Divorces, bankruptcies, all the things. Like I like to say, the only thing I've done perfect in my sobriety is I, no matter what, didn't drink. Everything else I've done wrong. Like I have screwed up throughout my entire recovery. But I didn't drink no matter what. And I made it through to where I could take whatever screw up I was going through the work and come out better on the other side. So yeah, the community's there just to be of service and support. I'm sure someday I may look at doing some sort of coaching for people that are in long-term recovery that want to expand their business or other things like that. But as far as people looking to stay sober, for me, I was freely given this gift, and it's nice to freely give that gift back wherever I came. So
same here, same exact page, me and you, as far as freely giving this gift. And so it's sobergangster.com. And we can find you Sober Gangster on Instagram. And
sober.gangster on Instagram, sobergangster.com on the internet.
And
I think it's just Sober Gangster on Facebook.
Okay. Because I want everyone to find you, and we're going to put it all out there for you too when this comes out. You said something so beautiful, and I could talk to you all night. I really could, but I won't do that to you. But you said something so beautiful, and I think it's probably the best way to close this is that your sobriety is your light, and I think that is just such a beautiful thing. I think it's a perfect way to close this. Even like I said, I don't want to close it. I'm big on relationships, and you and I are going to stay together. I'm coming to the Rock to Recovery with you next August. We'll talk about that offline. But Jason, I love what you're doing. You're a special guy. You're a special man. Keep doing what you're doing. And I look forward to you and I starting a long-term relationship. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I'm looking forward to promoting all you got going on, bud.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me on, Gary. And I love what you're doing. So this was fun.
Thanks so much. Talk soon, bud.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.